This episode of Tutia Bruja is sponsored by Floodwitch, dedicated to providing information that helps you build an ethical witchcraft practice by raising marginalized voices while reclaiming weird. This is Floodwitch. Check it out at floodwitch.com.
I can see you clearly.
¿Qué pasa, mis brujitos? You're listening to episode 13 of Tutia Bruja. So 13 has a really bad rep as a number, right? For the sake of this episode, I looked up numerology a little bit more. The number 13 is very important for securing a good foundation. With this show, I want it to be very clear that I am a radical witch who works with both hands. The reason that I work with both hands is because my magical journey has very much been intertwined with social justice. And last year, relocated for work, was in a time in my life where I just felt very weak and powerless, and I had to hex people because people abused their power and were hurting me and people around me. When I relocated from this job, I went to Denver and I was lucky enough to find some witches who, after this terrible situation in my life, were there to help show me around Denver and really just have a fun time. One of the things that I did when I was there, I went to Ritual Craft. I always find witchy shops. And I was very impressed with the shop for a lot of reasons. And then I got to meet Lou, who is today's guest. Lou goes by @the_Death_Witch on Instagram, is very open about working with both hands. And I wanted to have her on just to have a discussion about how hexing can be a form of resistance. I'm going to jump into the episode. I am a firm believer in magic finds you when you need it. Today, I'm really excited. Lou, who goes by @the_Death_Witch on Instagram, is joining us. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. Let's start at the beginning. How did you get involved with Ritual Craft?
Gosh, I was first invited to teach there, which I was really honored to do. And I was a little bit surprised about just because our scene, magical community in Colorado does tend to be a bit more love and light. And the traditions that I practice, I work from both hands and I make that very well known. So when I was invited to teach there, I was surprised, but pleasantly surprised. So that's how I started. And then about a couple months into my teaching there, I was offered a counter position by the owner, Missy Rising. And it was a one-day position on Sundays. And then from there, really my position grew to what it is today. I'm the front-end manager in the new building. We moved about a year and a half ago. So I'm now and currently the front-end manager there. And I also now co-run Ritual Craft School with my counterpart, Jess.
Is it Mile High Conjure?
Mile High Conjure Gala is my baby. That was also another kind of surprising thing that Ritual Craft and Missy was open to hosting at the shop. I work in the conjure tradition. I have elders in the conjure tradition that are very well respected. And in my opinion, they're the leaders of conjure as far as the elders go. I started the Conjure Gala here in Colorado as a way to elevate the elders of that tradition. You know, my elders aren't real hip to social media necessarily, and they are truly elders in the traditions. And I saw a lot of, and not to take anything away from anyone who is very seen on social media, but I saw these beautiful, well-curated accounts being cited for sources of information. And there is a lot of legitimate information on social media, but I was seeing the piece of elders and respecting our elders and community in person and the value of having human teachers. I was seeing that really being missed. So I decided to try to create an event where I could bring in my elders and teachers and their counterparts from all over the country to come and teach in Denver. And it kind of just grew from, I guess, a kind of a crazy idea from there.
Isn't it wonderful the things that witches can do?
It's truly, and that's actually, it's interesting that you bring that up because that's something that I think is really important in this time and space for Black and Brown folks to remember is that we're magical and we can create and we are creators and we have the power to create anything that we want. So it's funny that you bring that up. That's something that's been very, very much on my mind lately.
Yeah, mine too, because we are magic, you know? Our ancestors had to deal with so many different things, brought us to the point where there are people who don't call themselves brujas or witches, and they're still able to radiate out energy. And
Yep.
it's, you know, like not even intending to. It's like if you could fuel your power, it's astounding what we can do.
Truly.
Being in your power and magic, was that something that you always had around? Like, did you start practicing fairly young?
I did. You know, I think that I was very fortunate to grow up in a family where that was very encouraged and accepted, just being kind of wild in the truly wild sense. But also, so my sister was killed when she was 21 and I was 12. And it was very public and it was all over the news. It was on a national news level. And that was really the happening in my life that really put me in the place to find my first teacher and to really accept and to call in my own power and to harness the power around me. That was when I first met Santa Muerte. That was really the catalyst in my life that started me on the path that I walk.
And you bring up Santa Muerte, and I am also a devotee to Santa Muerte. What was it about her that spoke to you?
Being 12 and having media around, I mean, there was media at my sister's funeral. Everything felt very abrasive and invasive. And I learned how to call in what I would call kind of a shadow or a storm that I could put around me. And I found it very useful when I had to go back to school eventually. My family and I went on a trip to New Mexico. We spent a lot of time there when I was growing up. We went on a trip shortly after my sister was killed, and I looked up in a little shop in Town Square and I saw her, and immediately I recognized and I knew in my 12-year-old heart that that was the shadow that was there for me, that was the storm that I was able to call in. I had never felt or seen anything that felt so comfortable and felt so alive and felt so much like home. And that was really when I started to see her more. And from there, it was like she was always there. And I will forever be grateful for her. I don't think I would be here today or be the remotely sane person that I am if it wasn't for her presence in my life.
That's wonderful that she came to you. Again, magic finds you when you need it. I can only imagine what that must have been like to be 12 and have this major thing going on in your life. I've never actually spoken to her. I think I'm kind of a lazy devotee, but I try. She really does come to you when she sees that you're just in a place where essentially you need to be stitched back up. That like maternal figure who really does want to heal.
Yeah, absolutely. She's what I think of as being like the most loving and stern when we need it and protective. It's interesting because I say matriarchal figure, yet she is beyond that. Her presence is there's so much to it that's hard to even verbalize. The beautiful thing about her is that, in my experience anyhow, is that she is truly open and is there kind of like a friend who's willing to listen, but she really comes in and she really makes herself known and seen and heard and present at the times when we would normally think to give up or to give in. I mean, there's been so many times, even, recently with everything that we have going on in our political climate, that I have been able to lean into her energy when I've truly felt like I can't do this anymore, or I can't go to another march. I can't, and she's always been there, and she's still there when I need her right now to reinforce and to kind of help me hold my legs, if that makes sense.
That does. With the time, people wanting change, because it's written in the stars. Change is coming. We are in human vessels, so we do get tired. And I do see a lot of momentum, a lot of people changing and stuff. Also been very surprised and impressed. I know that TikTok was a big entity that pushed this, the working together of Christians and witches. And I'm like, what is the world coming to? It's all in strides for people of color and witches and marginalized people to fight back against oppressors, which was what magic was always about.
Say it again. Oh my gosh. Yes. There's two big things there, right? It's something that Missy, the owner of Ritual Craft, actually reminds me of often, is to remember that living and living well and being good to ourselves and resting and taking care of ourselves is also resistance. And that's something that I'm embracing and learning as I go. And then the other piece to that is this new unition that I guess that we're all experiencing. We're all seeing each other in different lights and realizing how much we all actually need each other. And then there's that other piece that I think that is really, really important, is that witchcraft and the witch, the bruja, the conjure woman, the conjure man, the root doctor, these are traditions that are based in resistance. These are traditions that are based, to call yourself by name, to call yourself a witch, to call yourself a bruja, to be an open conjurer. That's not something that our ancestors were able to enjoy the way that we do. And there's so much resistance in all of that. There's so much magic, and the calling in of spirit has been done by our people across all lineages for lifetimes. And it's been done as ways of everyday life, and it's been done as we protest, and it's been done historically. If we all took the time to really study our lineages and to study our bloodlines and to study the uses of magic and working with the plants and working with the trees and the ways that those spirits have been utilized to keep us alive when everything was encouraging us to give up, or everything was against us, or as we were seeking freedom, I think that people would be so much more inspired.
A big issue, Black and brown people don't always see themselves reflected in witch culture. So I understand there's been a long time, I'm going to say brainwashing, but people are going to disagree, of people and taking them away from their power and making them scared of things that are their traditions. And now you see a bunch of white witches doing it, both in the sense of white as skin, I guess, but also in the sense of love and light. It's just not feasible. It's not feasible to me that you could be someone who, like you said, takes on the term witch, who takes on all these years of oppression, and then are getting a little mad about property destruction.
Oh, God.
What?
Yeah, that is the representation in our communities, in the art, in the fashion, in the television media, right? The representation has been so lacking for so long that whenever I see, it's funny because I see representation by certain artists and I see representation in media and I feel grateful. I'm aware that I shouldn't feel that way because it should just be normalized. My husband is Vietnamese and his little sister is 14. And she is the one who helps me tie all the tags and stamp all the Death Witch oils. And we had a conversation one evening where she was being very, very quiet. And I was like, "What's up?" what's going on? And she was like, Loretta, can I be a witch? And I said, of course you can. What do you mean? What's going on? And she said, well, I'm Asian. I never see Asian witches that are not cartoons. So can I be a witch? And I wanted to cry because on one hand, I'm right. Of course she can. But on the other hand, that's been her experience. So interestingly, a few weeks later at the shop, we were having a craft market and Missy had brought in this local artist, Akeme, who is an Asian American person and does this amazing art of Asian peoples in witch hats, casting spells. It was so like, the universe answers you. And I felt like the universe was answering my little sister-in-law at that time. So I bought her all these prints and I gave them to her and she looked at them and she looked up at me and she said, that's me. And it filled my heart and it broke my heart at the same time because we have so much work to do.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I got a little teary-eyed. There are little humans all over the world who are just fascinated with witches because it's about empowerment and every person of color deserves that.
We have so much work to do in our own communities. We have so much work to do in the community at large. We have so much work to do. And I mean, that's, one of the beautiful things about social media, but we have a lot to do.
I will say that you telling me all of these things about ritual craft, because I knew it was white owned and I do support POC and Black owned and Indigenous owned shops whenever I can. Yeah. It is important to also give money to white people who are providing spaces and white people who, are doing what they can to change things. Mm-hmm. As POCs, like we can scream until we're blue in the face and they're only going to listen so much. Having these spaces and being able to do these things and connect.
So true. That's actually one of the things when I was first invited to teach a ritual craft, that was one of the things. I'd been in there. Even the first incarnation of the shop is a very beautiful shop. But I was like, okay, I'm going to check out this new witch shop. We'll see what's up. And I went in and the first thing that stood out to me was that there were goods there that were POC made and that there were goods there that were actually made by people that look like me. And I wasn't the first person of color to be employed at the shop. So that was another thing that I was like, all right, I hate to say it, but, I think that there is something important about the awareness of being tokenized. And I'm always looking for that. And it's a defense mechanism that I've built up just in my own experiences in life. But the fact that when I walked into the shop, there were already people of color. So I was like, all right, this is actually a safe place. This isn't a place that pretends to be a safe place. This is actually a safe place.
Maybe it's just me as an out-of-towner, but like Denver itself, it has a particular magic to it. There's something about it, such a magical place, but as of recently, I've been doing like a lot of research and there's a lot of racism there too.
It's a very interesting place. We have a really vast history of white supremacy here, and it's very present still. It's not history in the sense of, it's done and over with. It's history in the sense of it's very deeply rooted. We have a ton of Proud Boys here. We have a ton of All Lives Matter folks here. We have a ton of very problematic and dangerous ideologies here. There's the surface of Denver, right? And then there's this weird kind of molten lava that is underneath.
I want to touch base on that because you mentioned Proud Boys and other groups that are white supremacist ideology. If you're wondering, like, what? No, how can Denver be like this? So in 1920, right, there were no members of the Klan there. In 1925, the Klan was all over Colorado's government. They had taken over the Colorado House, the Senate, the Office of the Secretary of State, the State Supreme Court judgeship, 7 branches of Denver's District Court, the City Council in several Colorado towns, the governor of Colorado at the time, and the mayor of Denver. So that's less than 100 years ago. So if you're like, how did we get there? Those people had families who had families, and that's why there are Proud Boys there today.
100%. Oldest functioning, still functioning cemetery in Denver, Riverside Cemetery, there is a whole ass Confederate memorial. This isn't a brand new thing. And when I say a whole ass Confederate memorial, I'm talking there are Confederate graves all over that cemetery. And towards the back of the cemetery, there is a literal memorial for the Confederacy that on any occasion that I've been there, and I haven't been there recently because I haven't been out of the house a whole lot recently, other than to go to work and come home, there is consistently a Confederate flag flown there at that memorial. There are, on several occasions that I've been there to do my work and honor other spirits there are truckfuls of Proud Boys that go around and place Confederate flags at those graves. Like, this is not ancient history. This is very, very recent and current. Would like for Denver to be. There's so much more than meets the eye.
It's interesting to me that weed legalization automatically means progressive, because it's not. The whole fact that there are people in Colorado locked up is just wild to me, when there are literally stores in Denver that look like an Apple store.
Oh gosh, they're on every street corner. I think that we in Denver probably have more dispensaries than we do Starbucks at this point. Like, I can turn, if I'm standing at any given crossroad in Denver, I can turn in a direction and I'm going to see a dispensary. That's just what it is. I think that people oftentimes confuse the word legalization for decriminalization, because that hasn't happened here. And I don't know that, I know that they're trying to take steps now to decriminalize and to release people who have been jailed for weed offenses, but quote unquote offenses, but also, how long has the weed game been legalized in Denver? You know, you're real late. You're real late. And I mean, I could go on for hours about how problematic it is that we have more access to weed than we do to education, than we do to resources for people who have been affected by COVID. I could go on and on and on about that. While we have access to that, yet it hasn't been decriminalized. It makes me insane.
The weed is just a Band-Aid. How do you deal with your life falling apart? It's just like, smack a little weed on it. It's going to be okay.
Yep.
I like Denver. I'm not going to lie. Like, again, as an out-of-towner, like, I like going there. But you really do start to realize very quickly, everyone here is white. And maybe not everyone here is white. It's just most of the people you see are white.
Totally. Denver has been very gentrified. When I was growing up, it was a very different landscape. I mean, I don't even recognize a lot of places in Denver anymore. And there was so much more diversity, I think. I mean, all of my favorite restaurants growing up are gone. All of my favorite little shops are gone. All of my favorite parks are not the same. They don't feel the same to me. It doesn't feel as welcoming to me anymore. The house I grew up in is gone. There is a triplex on that land now. It's all connected, though. It's, you know, the legalization of weed in Colorado brought in this mass gentrification, and it really changed a lot. You know, don't get me wrong, that Colorado is a magical place. It's beautiful. There are gems here, and there are beautiful people here, and there is a lot of magic here. But as a community, we really do have a lot to unfold and to undo and to try to somehow rebuild. It makes me really, really sad because I grew up in Denver. I grew up in the North Side, which is now called the Highlands. And I purposely moved out of Denver up to very, very far out. I live in like the literal boonies because I had to get away. I had to get away from all of the people. I had to get away from all of the traffic, like all of these crazy things that happened in a matter of 10 to 15 years. I couldn't stay, like it wasn't good for my spirit anymore to stay where I grew up. A friend who's searching for housing right now, and it's such a struggle, and it shouldn't be, it should be in order to make like a living wage here. I mean, it's insane.
With all the former Klan stuff, is Denver predominantly a very pro-police city?
I've always thought of it that way. You get the call, a couple times a year from the police union, and you see a lot of the stickers on the cars. But I will say that I was very, very pleasantly surprised to see the mass amount of people that have been showing up at these demonstrations that have started since the murder of Mr. Floyd. This is a conversation I actually had with one of my elders, with Doc Beverly Smith. The other piece that has been very surprising to me, and pleasantly surprising, is the amount of white allyship that has been showing up at these demonstrations. It has been really, really surprising. And Doc Bev was saying that it's taken her a minute to really process that. And, Bev has been doing this work for a very, very long time. She is truly an elder in the Conjure community, and she has very heartbreaking stories of experiencing desegregation. And she had boots on the ground in Ferguson. And during this latest wave of the resistance, she has been really surprised, just like I have, at how many people are actually sick of this shit.
I will say that also with you being in Denver, that's not far from Aurora, which is unfortunately where Elijah McClain was murdered at the hands of police. And I know that that's been a case, that happened over a year ago, and we unfortunately didn't hear about it until maybe like the last 4 months. Has there been a lot of resistance and demonstrations and stuff regarding that specific death?
Yeah, this case with Elijah McClain, there's been activism every night for the last few months. And as late as we are to this murder and to the awareness around this murder, because I'll be the first to say it, I'm late to that. But it shows how much work we have to do. There has been demonstrations, and it's every night, and people are very, very brave and, go up to Aurora headquarters. And there's also activism done here in Denver at City Park and at the Capitol. DPD is currently honoring, surprisingly, a restraining order because of how bad the brutality was the first few nights around those protests. There's a long history of police brutality here in Colorado, but Denver is currently honoring that restraining order, whereas the demonstrations up in Aurora are met with extreme violence. And when I say extreme violence, I mean the fact that folks playing the violin at a memorial are being shot with rubber bullets and tear gassed. And then Aurora PD has the nerve to publicly deny that tear gas was used, even though there are people that were there that experienced it. And there are videos of it, is astounding.
For reference, this is the same PD that just let James Holmes, who was the Aurora shooter, he was just arrested, no big deal, after just massacring a bunch of people. You can see very clearly whose lives are valued.
On top of that, around the Aurora shooter, at that point, at that time, me looking at my social media, watching the news, this is my state, hearing so many people around me saying, oh, he has mental illness, like making up excuses for this mass murderer. And then, in the next few years, you have, I'm aware that Elijah McClain was in his 20s, but he was a child. You have a child walking home in the same place to be brutally murdered by the same police department that peacefully handcuffed and arrested the Aurora shooter. It says so much. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around, and I know that there are a lot of people in my community that are still trying to wrap their minds around it, and it's painful and it's ugly and it is disgusting. And then that same police department goes and takes photos of themselves at the memorial, at Elijah's memorial. It's astounding to me. I don't even know if there are words to properly put into perspective the lack of humanity and the offense to the idea of compassion that Aurora PD has displayed unapologetically.
And it's because of all of that I'm a radical witch.
Yep.
I have just realized that the government, the laws, everything is working the way it was designed to work.
Truly. Yep.
There's only so much we can do. Not that I'm saying don't march, not that I'm saying don't protest. Obviously do that. Civil disobedience is very important. But what I am saying is that there are times where you have to take matters into your own hands. That's why I practice with both hands, because people can't keep being out here doing this stuff anymore. They just can't.
Working from both hands I get that it's not for everybody, and that's okay. I want there to be an understanding that it's necessary and that hexing and crossing has historically been and is currently been used in resistance, and it is not a bad thing to do. And let's start with addressing the term black magic, and let's start with decompressing and with getting really real about the language we use in witchcraft. But there's so much that has to be done as far as spiritual warfare goes. I think spiritual warfare is a legitimate form of resistance, and I understand that the term spiritual warfare can be abrasive to some people, but we are not put here. I truly believe that we are not put here to turn the other cheek in the face of hate and oppression and of true evil. I think that there is a time and place for hexing and crossing. And I'm not talking about, hex your ex. I'm talking about when something matters and is going to continue to matter for 5 years. That's my general rule. Ask yourself, is this going to matter 5 years from now? No? Then you probably need to find another type of working. Yes? Then let's pull out the asafoetida and let's pull out the roots and the sticks and let's get to work.
And also do a tarot reading.
Yes.
Like if you really feel set that you need to hex someone, do some divination, because quite frankly, you could be overreacting. Like you might be. Like social justice, I don't think probably are. But no, I'm with you. Like I feel like whenever you do something, to be aware of what you're doing, at the end of the day being like, I stick by it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's okay to, if you're too close to the situation, to divine it for yourself, to get a reading. Ask somebody to throw some bones for you. Ask somebody to throw down some cards. Clarity is important, and looking at things, especially when we're talking about actual cursing, it's important to remember that it's an investment. It's an energetic investment. Can be a financial investment, and it is a time investment. So if something is that important, if something really deserves that much investment, like social justice, like bringing police to justice for murdering folks, then go ahead and make that investment. But if it's something that you probably, like, if you wouldn't really want to spend the money on it, then don't. It's the same thing with your energy.
Oh, and one thing I will suggest, since we are talking about, if you're at a protest and you just happen to notice some broken glass from a cop car or something, some type of vehicle, but be sure and collect some of that in a place where you won't get cut, but save it because that's going to be really useful for you. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
Absolutely.
Be crafty.
For sure. In fact, that's one of the things that I love about Conjure is that it is, in general, it is, very logical.
I don't know. I wasn't fortunate enough to have someone to like really, really learn from. I'll kind of just like come to me with time.
Yeah. And there's value in that, right? There's history in that. The truth is that no matter where we come from and no matter where our lineage is, we carry this knowledge and we carry this power in our veins. So that makes perfect sense. As long as you're digging deep and you're doing the work, regardless of not regardless of where it comes from, but as long as you're being authentic and you're doing the work and you're honoring roots of things and you're honoring the people that things come from, I think that knowing that you're a magical person and knowing that your ancestors are there and that you carry this knowledge for a reason, and even if you don't recognize it as being like quote unquote knowledge, I think that having that ability to dig into that is magical. There's craft in that, right? There's craft in hearing something and seeing something and then executing that. It's all craft.
Very well put.
Thank you.
So Lou, where can everybody support you and find you?
I can be found on Instagram under The Death Witch. Really, really important to me is Mile High Conjure Gala. The gala has an Instagram at the Mile High Conjure Gala, and that's where you can find my elders and my teachers and the people that I owe my life and a lot of my magic to, and that's super important to me as well. And if you're local, you can always pop into the shop at Ritual Craft, and I'm there, happy to answer questions. And if you're not local, hop on the gram.
That was the episode. Thank you again for listening to Tutia Bruja. I love all of the support that I get from the show and saying that it resonated in some way or, a topic really touched base in some way. Last week's episode about the Harlem Renaissance, I had a lot of people tell me that they really thought about their own education and how they hadn't read an author that was post the civil rights movement. I'm really glad that episode resonated. It's important to me to have a wide variety of topics because there's definitely magic in everything, and being able to find ways to make that connection with history definitely makes us all grow a little bit more in our power. I want to read a review that I got on the show, just because I really do appreciate when you guys take the time and review the show. Not only is it amazing and really helps boost us and more people can see us, this speaks to me as a white passing Puerto Rican who grew up in a very religious home, who was also terrified to look into the occult while being drawn to it. This speaks to me. Bex is passionate, has strong opinions, and expects you to do the work. And you should. We all should. Hard to hear some of the political ideas expressed, well, then maybe you need to re-examine that. Self-reflect and grow as a bruja and a person. All the stars. I appreciate it. Thank you for your review. Thanks again for listening. I hope that you're able to manifest everything you want in your life. I value you. Have a great rest of your day.
I can see you clearly.